Hey, what's up, dudes and dudettes? This is Caleb Ward with PremiumBeat.com. In this quick tutorial, I'm going to give you the 411 on how to create this bomb diggity 80s inspired logo reveal. Let's hop in. So before we hop into this tutorial, I want to give you a quick overview about what we're going to be creating here. So like any good 80s logo reveal, you can see we have this grid background and the colors are mostly purple. We have this duplicated text effect, which is actually fairly easy to do in After Effects, a really cheesy light ray, and some distorted video overlays that can just kind of make this look like it's being played back on VHS. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new composition. So I'm going to go to Composition, New Composition, and we don't want this to be 4K. Instead, we're going to have it be 1080p, 24 frames per second, and the comp name, we can just call this, text, and hit OK. So the first thing we're going to do is create the cool text right in the center here. So we're going to type in Premium Beat, but you could just do whatever you want and go ahead and select all that text. We're going to use a font called Good Times, and you can find this font in the PDF that will be included in the download of this tutorial. So if you follow the link in the description below, you'll find a blog post where you can download the free video footage and project file from this tutorial. So we're just going to kind of scale this up and center it up. And one quick trick, if you go to the proportional grid here, you can find exactly where the center of the composition is, and we can go ahead and turn off the proportional grid. So no 80s text would be complete without a reflection map, so we're going to create another new composition, and we're going to call this Reflection, and we can just keep it 20 seconds long, that's okay, and hit OK. And when it comes to 80s reflections, there's really only two colors you need to worry about, purple and blue. So we're going to go ahead and create this reflection map and make sure to include lots of purple and blue. So I'm going to hit Command Y to create a new solid, and this can be a black solid. We'll just call this black and hit OK. And I'm going to turn on our transparency just so we can see what's going on here. And we're just going to select our rectangle tool here and just kind of cut out the top and feather it out. There you go. And you can find the feathering option if you just go to this drop down menu here, click on the mask, you can see mask feather, or you can just hit the F key. So we'll drag this down to where it's just kind of cutting off the top here. And let's duplicate this and hit Shift Command Y. And we're going to make this one white. And let's go ahead and select white here. Hit OK and new. And let's go ahead and hit R and rotate this white solid 180 degrees. So now we have black on top and white on the bottom. So now let's add in our blue. So I'm going to hit Command Y and let's pick a really saturated deep blue. So something right in, let's say here, and hit OK and OK. And let's go ahead and drop this below the white and the black. And in fact, I think I actually want to add a gradient ramp to this. And this is just going to help kind of smooth out the colors. So I can go ahead and just sample the blue from the little blue thumbnail here. And for this color, I want to select maybe a little bit more of a purpley blue. So maybe right in here and make it desaturated. So somewhere about there. And we can just grab this little handle here from the lavender color and just kind of drag it up to right about there. And now it's time to add in purple to our reflection. So hit Command Y and we'll call this purple. Ooh, that is misspelled. Purple, and we will select kind of a deep, kind of almost pink purple color and hit OK and OK. So we're going to add in a gradient ramp just like before, and let's go ahead and sample the purple color. And for the secondary color, let's select something that's a little more desaturated, maybe a little closer to red. Be like this light lavender color, and hit OK. Let's go ahead and drag the purple down. We'll just create this kind of slight ramp here. And let's go ahead and drop this below the white and the black solids. And I'm going to go to our rectangle tool, and with our purple layer selected, we're just going to cut the scene in half, right about there. Cool. So the last thing we want to do is add in kind of our black mountains to our reflection map here. So I'm going to hit Command Y, and we're going to call this mountains, and we're going to make it black. Hit OK and OK. So let's go in here and cut out some mountains. So I'm going to have our pen tool selected, and we can just kind of go in and just kind of cut out some like jagged elements just like this. It doesn't have to be perfect, just something that is a little shape based, and we'll kind of click down here. So now we have these mountains here, but we don't want them to extend all the way to the bottom. Instead, I'm going to select our rectangle tool, and we're gonna just kind of bring it up to right about here, and we're gonna go to our mask here and select subtract and feather it out. And we can go ahead and drag this rectangle down right about there. So now you can see we have this gnarly 80s reflection map. So now let's hop back over to our text, and let's drag down our reflection map, and we're going to set it to the bottom here, and let's change our track matte to alpha matte. So now if we kind of scale this down, you can see we're beginning to get this cool 80s reflection text. Cool. And if we wanted this to stand out a little bit more, we could go back over to our reflection map, and let's select our blue here, and for our secondary color, let's brighten it up just a little bit and drag it up to where it's peeking over the mountains a little bit more, and we can drag this blue down a little bit. It's right about there. And so if we go back over here, we can see that it dynamically changes it, so now Premium Beat just kind of stands out a little bit more. Cool, let's go ahead and pre-compose this text layer here. So let's select both of those layers and hit Shift-Command-C, and we'll call this moving text and hit OK. So now we want to make this text move. And if you remember in our original logo reveal, the text kind of slowly pushes in and comes to a stop. So I'm going to select the 3D box here, and we'll go ahead and set a keyframe at 4 seconds and set a position keyframe, and let's move forward to about 1 second, and let's select the Z space here, and we'll just drag this forward all the way to where it's past the camera. So now if we kind of look at it here, we see that this text kind of comes in and comes to a halt, and it just comes to a halt real harshly. So I'm going to select this keyframe, go to the graph editor, and we're going to smooth this out. And we do this every single time we want to make organic movements in After Effects. So now we see Premium Beat kind of comes in and slowly comes to a stop. So this is looking good, and I'm going to pre-compose this one more time, and we'll call this Premium Beat Text, and move all attributes to the new composition and hit OK. So let's go over here to our project panel, and I'm going to change the name of our final composition from text to final comp. And now it's time to build the background. So I'm going to deselect the eyeball here, and I'm going to hit Command Y for a new solid, and we'll just call this BG for background. It can be black, that's fine. Hit OK. And let's apply a gradient ramp effect. And for the bottom color here, I want to do a deep purple, so something about like that. And for the top color, we can do maybe a little bit lighter purple, but still pretty dark, maybe right about there, and hit OK. And we'll go ahead and drag this below our text, and let's hit Command Y to create a new solid, and let's call this one Vignette, and it needs to be black. Hit OK. And now let's select our pen tool and just kind of click around here. So we're just going to create kind of an irregular shape and click away. So now we have this shape that is kind of this blobby, amorphous shape in the center of our composition. We don't want this, so go to your mask and set the transfer mode or the mask mode to subtract, and hit F to feather out the edges. So something about like that. Cool, so now it's time to create a grid. So I'm gonna hit Command Y, and we can make this a white solid, and we'll just call this grid and hit OK. And there's actually a great tool in After Effects called Grid, and we can just drag that on, and now you can adjust these little handles here to get the grid you want. So we want our grid to be about like this, and we can go in and change our transfer mode to overlay. So now we have this just kind of background grid here, and we can drop it below the vignette. Cool, so the next thing we want to do is add in our triangle shape. So to do that, I'm going to hit Command Y to create a new solid, and we'll just call this triangle and hit OK. And I'm going to hit T and turn down the opacity to about 50%. And go to your pen tool here, and now let's go in and just create a triangle. So I'm going to just kind of click here, maybe about here, and we'll set another point here and go back to the original. So now we can go in and we can kind of finesse this as we need. We can adjust the points here where it's just exactly like what we want it to be. So that's good, and I'm going to turn up the opacity to 100%, and let's move this above the grid. So now if we go to our grid here, we can select Alpha Matte Inverted, and now the grid only pops up where the triangle is not. And this is looking good, but we want the outline of the triangle to be seen. So I'm going to duplicate the triangle, and let's turn on the eyeball here. And let's go to the mask and duplicate this mask and set the second one to subtract. And so now if we kind of turn up the expansion, you see that a line is introduced into our scene. So now we want to kind of match this up with the thickness of the grid here, so we can just adjust this as we need, so maybe right about there, and set the transfer mode to overlay. Cool, so now we have this awesome 80s triangle and grid. Now to stylize this just a little bit further, I'm going to create kind of these star elements at certain points in this grid. So I'm going to hit Command Y to create a new solid. We'll call this Star Arm 1 and hit OK. And I hit T and I'm going to turn down the opacity just so I can see what's going on. And I'm just going to kind of create just kind of a feathered out box here. And if we hit F and deselect this checkbox here, we can feather just along the Y axis. So something maybe about like that. And I'm going to duplicate this star arm one time and rotate it 90 degrees. And let's go ahead and select both of these star elements, hit Shift Command C, and we'll just call this star and hit OK. And so now we can scale this down and just move it along certain points in our composition. So I'm just going to kind of scale this down to where it fits kind of perfectly along this grid arm here and set the transfer mode to add. Cool. And let's go ahead and duplicate that, and we're going to move another one maybe right here. And we can go ahead and scale it down and go in and just kind of center it up. Duplicate it one more time, and maybe we want another one to be over here. We can scale it up and center it. Cool. So now we have just these random star elements in our scene. And now it's time to add in the secondary text elements. So no 80s logo would be complete without overtly stating what year it is. So I'm going to type in copyright 1983, the best year that ever was. And I'm going to go ahead and scale that down. And we'll change this font to Tall, Dark, and Handsome. And there's a link to this font download in the PDF included in the download of this tutorial. And again, you can find that at premiumbeat.com/blog. And let's change the color to just kind of a 50% gray, right about there. And we can kind of scale it up. We want it to be kind of towards the top here. And if you wanted to, you could go ahead and turn on the eyeball for the Premium Beat text. We can kind of drag this up here. And as you can see, this is kind of big. And so I'm actually going to go into our text composition here, and we can double click again, and let's go ahead and scale down this text. We just want it to kind of be just ever so slight and in the middle here. So it was a little too large before, and we can just change our reflection map. And the cool thing, because we used pre-comps, this is no hassle whatsoever. So if we hop back over to our final comp, you can see this looks a little bit better. It's just lined up in the center, and now we can adjust our copyright text to kind of supplement the Premium Beat logo here. And of course, we have to add in the grungy text below the clean sans serif font. So let's go to our text tool here and type in rocks. And I'm going to select rocks here, and we can change the color to maybe just a real bright pink, like a really obnoxious pink. And let's go to our font selection tool here, and we'll do Endless Bummer. but this text is of course not a bummer, it's awesome. And we can go in and just adjust the kerning by hand. So just select each character here and go to the kerning here and just adjust it. And this isn't perfect, but that's okay because, you know, it's the 80s. The 90s are perfect. The 80s are just pretty good. Let's type in our effects browser here, corner pin, and we can drag over the corner pin effect to the rocks text here, and let's go ahead and kind of drag up this point here, and we're just gonna try to kind of create just kind of some slanted text. And so now that we have it slanted, we can drag it back over to where it's kind of centered up here. Boom, rocks. Awesome, so let's style this text here. So let's go to the bevel effect, and we can bevel the alpha and apply it to the rocks text. We can just kind of turn this up, kind of move the light height. So if we zoom in here, you can see there's kind of this slight bevel, and it's nice and cheesy, just like it should be. Yeah, right about there. And let's kind of zoom out here. Awesome, so let's go ahead and type in glow in our effects browser here, and let's apply it to the premium beat text. And we can kind of dial this in. Maybe we want to turn down the threshold to where it's right about there and just kind of turn up the radius. Cool, so now we have this really crazy 80s text. And as you already know, the text kind of zooms in here. And we want to make this effect have that kind of duplication 80s look. So I'm going to go to our effects browser and type in echo. So if you apply echo to the text, immediately you'll kind of see that there's these kind of extra copies popping up here. And we can kind of turn this up to maybe about 15. So right now, because the echo operator is set to add, it's just so bright you can't even tell what's going on. We're going to actually change this to maximum. So now you can see a little more of the detail here. And in fact, let's take our glow and apply it after the echo. And we can go in and kind of turn down the threshold here to where, yeah, it's a little more subtle and not so over the top and bright. And now what we can do, if you kind of take a look at the text, it kind of comes in here and comes to a stop. But there's this like black outline that remains, and to get rid of that, we're gonna set a keyframe right here at the 4-second mark where the text finally kind of pushes in and is coming to a stop. And we're gonna hit this starting intensity, and we're going to move forward about 2 seconds and set that starting intensity to 0. So now the text comes to a stop and fades out. Cool, so let's go in now and animate the rocks text. So I'm going to apply a linear wipe to the text. So we can just go to rocks here. And as you adjust this, you can see that it kind of fades on in the opposite direction. So we're going to change our wipe angle to -90 instead of +90. And I'm going to set a keyframe where it's off screen at about 3 seconds. And we'll move forward about 1.5 seconds and move this to where it's completely on screen. So now premium beat rocks. Cool. And we can go ahead and feather out this edge here. So even though this looks cheesy, it is quintessentially 80s. You know, they didn't have After Effects back then, so they couldn't make awesome stuff. But you can create awesome stuff. So I can see a few different things that I'm going to want to go in and stylize here. So the first blaring thing is this copyright text is way too big. So I'm going to select it and go to the character panel here. I'm going to go ahead and scale this down. One thing I can see that we are missing is our obnoxious light ray. So let's go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and luckily for us, there is an effect called light rays. And so let's go ahead and add this to our adjustment layer. And let's go ahead and keyframe it to where it matches the rocks text coming in. So let's go over here and we'll set a keyframe right here for the center. So set a keyframe and we'll move forward to the end where rocks finishes. We'll set a keyframe right up here. So now if we take a look, we can see that rocks kind of animates in with this cool glowing light ray thing. And we don't want it to stay on screen after it gets done animating. So I'm going to set a keyframe at the very beginning for the intensity. And we'll move back one frame and set the intensity to 0. And then let's move forward a little bit to right at the very end of the animation. And if you hit U, you can see all the effects that have keyframes applied to them. And we're just going to set another keyframe. We'll move forward one frame and change the intensity to 0. So now if we preview this back, we have rocks come in with this light ray effect, and then it animates off. Cool. So now let's add in this light sweep effect, kind of emphasize the premium beat text. So I'm going to go to light sweep, and we're going to apply this to our premium beat text. So let's go in and move this light sweep to kind of off the screen. And let's set a keyframe at about, let's say, 4 seconds for the center. And we'll move forward 2 seconds and kind of move it to the other side. So now if you preview it back, you can see you have the text is kind of outlined a little bit more and actually kind of creates this cool metallic look. And I'm going to turn up the width just a little bit. And let's turn up the intensity as well. Cool. So now when it sweeps through, you have maximum impact. And I'm going to go ahead and drag the glow below the light sweep so it kind of is glowing some of this extra kind of color that's being added in here. Awesome. So let's go ahead and drag our premium beat text above our other text here. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is kind of animate this whole composition in. So in order to do that, I'm going to set a keyframe at about 2 seconds and 10 frames, and we'll go to the vignette layer and go to expansion and set a keyframe and move forward to about 1 second. And we can kind of crank this down to, like, let's say negative, what are we at, 404. And it kind of just fades on. Cool. And let's go up to our adjustment layer here and apply a curves effect. So now with this curves effect, we're going to kind of create our own little 80s style cross dissolve. So I'm going to move forward to about 2 seconds, set a keyframe, and move back to 0. And we can just move the RGB channel all the way down. Now, this has created just a normal cross dissolve, but if you want this to look like an 80s cross dissolve, you need to go to the blue channel, and you have the keyframe already set for the 2 second mark. But if you go to the very beginning and move down the blue channel, whenever you see the composition kind of fading in, you'll notice that you're getting some of these kind of yellowy orange elements. And if you go back and watch 80s cross dissolves, because they didn't have the computers to create the cross dissolve, it was always this crazy color optical thing that would always introduce new colors. And so now if we kind of fade this on, you can see it kind of looks more like kind of a retro cross dissolve. And let's go ahead and set our composition to maybe about 6 seconds long, and we'll do trim comp to work area. And we'll set a keyframe again with this curve selected. We can just go in and set a keyframe at about 4 seconds and 18 frames, scrub to the very end here, and we'll kind of drop down the blue again and go back to our RGB and drop it down to the very bottom. So now it kind of fades out and it kind of looks like an arcade, which is cool. Cool. In fact, I want this whole composition to start at about the 1 second mark. And so we can go ahead and drag our little handle here, go to trim comp, and so now we kind of have this text reveal, kind of fades in, rocks pops up, and we have this cool kind of light sweep, and it fades to black. Awesome. This is looking good, but that's the problem. This shouldn't look perfect. There should be some distortion in here. So I'm going to drag in our distortion asset that comes with the free download, and I'm going to change the transfer mode to screen. And this is just helping the whole composition look a little more distorted. And the very last thing we're going to do, and then we are done, is we're going to apply a curves effect to our adjustment layer on top. And I'm going to drag up the bottom point. This is the low lights. And I just kind of want the blacks to be kind of a milky dark gray instead of a completely black image. And I'm going to drag down the whites just a little bit. And so As you can see, this kind of made the whites a light gray and the blacks kind of a dark gray. And so now let's go ahead and preview this back. Cool, and obviously there's an issue here, and it's that the U just kind of bounces in. It's really weird. So cool thing about working in pre-comps, we can just double click inside the premium beat text, find the movement here, and as you can see, the text actually is on screen here. We don't want that. Instead, I'm going to go to the keyframe here. We can actually go in here and drop down the Y to where it is perfectly off screen and exactly where we want it. So now we kind of zoom through the U instead of on top of the U. So if we go back into our final comp, we can see that it kind of fades around the camera instead of on top of it. Cool. Yeah, this is looking awesome. And I can see that our copyright text is kind of in the frame the entire time. Instead, we want it to fade on. So I'm going to set an opacity keyframe at about 2 seconds. Actually, I'm going to move it down to about 3 seconds, and we'll change the opacity to 0. So now kind of premium beat falls on, copyright 1983, rocks. Light sweep, fade to black. So as you can see, we've created this awesome 80s logo reveal in only a matter of minutes. If you're ever looking for some rad royalty-free music, go check out Premium Beat. Premium Beat has thousands of gnarly tracks for all you dudes and dudettes out there. This has been Caleb Ward. We'll see you next time.